One key thing is they call anything that isn't exactly the way it should be a defect. And then they send the organization to discover the root causes of those defects and fix them. But by labeling any deviation from perfect a defect, giving the word, people are motivated to go, we're going to eliminate the causes of those defects. So that's why they have that and-on cord on production lines, so they can stop the line immediately when any worker detects a defect. They can stop the line and then get to root cause immediately.
It's more important to get to the root cause than to keep going fast.
If you keep going, you just build, the root cause is unchanged, and you just build more cars with that defect in it.
Do you have these knobs in your personal life at all for defects? Or is there anything you can apply otherwise?
Oh, the knob would always be ringing. No, I have a wife, so I get that immediate attention. Immediate recognition of defects. She's very good at this.
That's true. That's true.
CEO and co-founder. Founding partner of Palantir co-founder
Scott Cook is one of my favorite founders, leaders, and mentors in Silicon Valley. He's seen as one of the greatest CEO coaches there is. He, of course, was also an amazing CEO himself, an amazing investor. Many of us in the Valley look up to him and learn a lot of lessons from him when we get to spend time with him. We hosted over 60 of our CEOs at HVC at a recent summit in Napa Valley, and he shared a lot of his leadership lessons, gave a lot of tips on the types of things he coaches the best CEOs on, and we're lucky to be able to share it with you as an episode of American Optimist.
The thing that's interesting to me is who should be put in charge of the culture of a company. You know, is there a group? Do you have a team? It's more the how. And I do think there should be someone in charge of the culture of the company, somebody who knows it's their job. And that should be the CEO. Because you're making the culture, whether you know it or not, with every decision and behavior that you do. Well-intended or not, the company, I mean, you hire the people, you pay them, reward them, promote them, and they learn their behaviors from you as the CEO. So you've got to be the number one culture carrier. Well, you are the number one culture carrier, whether you think about it or not. So you need to think about it and set the culture with your steps, with your behaviors, the way you want it to be.
And you've seen a lot of startup founders over the years. Is that something that people very often get wrong? Is that hard to do?
I've run into CEOs who said, I don't really like where the culture of my company is. But you have to realize the culture is a mirror. And when you look in the mirror, you're seeing how the culture got created and maintained. And I think one trap is for CEOs who have this thing of do what I say, not what I do. That they believe everyone should do certain things, but I'll be different. I can make decisions differently. And people are going to learn how you make decisions, who you involve, what's your metric success, based on what you do. And if you role model what you want, you'll get what you want. If you try to play by different rules, then who knows what you're going to get.
One of the things you mentioned a lot of people are learning over time. What techniques or tactics can founders use to grow their skills with their companies?
Well, let me pick the case where you've decided there's some skill area that you really want to grow in. I'm going to pick the case where that probably means you're pretty shitty at it today. This is not window dressing. There's something that's important where you're not that good today, and you've determined you've got to be good for the success of your company. So in that case, I'd think of 4 steps. The first is you got to get aware and realize where your gaps are. And psychology, our human mind, we're built to not see our gaps. We are built to think that we're just great people. If you think you're aware of all your weaknesses and gaps in the way other people are seeing them, you're wrong. You're just missing the reality because that's the way our minds work. So find a way through a 360 or some other process to confront the brutal reality of where you need to change. And then secondly, pick one area, maybe 2, and commit. Commit, say, damn it, I'm going to become great at this, and I'm not today. And then tell people. If you keep it a secret, you're not going to change. You got to go public with it. Tell your board, tell your management team, I know I'm not as good at this as I need to be. Here are examples. I'm going to get a lot better, and I need your help. So second, you got to commit. And third, you got to find what great is. Because you don't want to just learn from average, you want to learn from great. So ask your board, who have you seen who's really great at X? X being the area you want to get good at. And go find those people. Don't learn from the mediocre, learn from the very best. And then fourth, go see those people. And the sense of the word see I use is, in this case, is go see them lead, shadow them, and watch that person do the very things that they're awesome at, that you'd like to learn. And don't just talk to them about it. We've had our leaders do some shadowing of CEOs. And I set up most of those for the team, and then at the end realized, well, I didn't set up one for myself. So I tagged along with our CFO, and we went up and met with this CEO who we'd set up to shadow him for the day, but he hadn't gotten the message. He thought he was supposed to tell us what he did. So we dutifully took notes for about 50 minutes where he told us how he led. And then people were accumulating at his door trying to get in, and we said, we're actually here to watch. He said, oh, okay. So then watched him for the rest of the day. Half the stuff he told us he did as a leader we never saw. More importantly, half the stuff we saw him do, he never mentioned. So go watch. And then the second part of see is have that person see you. I mean, how can someone advise you on how you can play the game better if they don't watch you play the game? I mean, if they just listen to the news reports the day after. So any great coach is going to watch the athlete play. And so invite that person to come shadow you for a day or half a day, just so they can see the reality. So that's you got to realize where your gaps are. You got to commit to one or two publicly. You got to find out what great is, how high is up, and then you got to see with your eyes how that person behaves, and then have that person see you. Now, all of this is in service to creating a feedback loop so that you can get constant feedback on the area you need to change to be constantly course correcting.
It's good advice for CEOs who aren't already perfect. There's maybe a couple of you out there. One phenomenon, Scott, we've seen play out again and again as the company gets bigger, maintaining its culture of innovation and disruption seems to get a lot harder. And how do you mentor CEOs to foster a culture of innovation within their teams, especially as the companies grow? Yeah,
there's an old statement that success makes you slow and stupid. Let me actually ask, there's a variety of challenges or barriers, and then a variety of solutions that address those root causes. Maybe let me ask some people in the audience, who's facing the problem that Joe is describing? And then I want you to describe what's the challenges you see, what keeps the innovation from happening. Go, sir.
I'm with a company called National Resilience. My company has grown very fast. The company is scaled up over the last 3 years from N of 1 to 2,000 people. And the challenge that we have seen a couple of things. One is, we have moved away from, or at least the culture of the company has become much more an operational culture, a more disciplined, rigorous, less risk-taking culture as opposed to much more fast-moving culture. And I think as a CEO, I'm trying to balance both the things. I'm trying to have a culture which can be agile, but also keep the discipline because there are mistakes that are very, very expensive. So you cannot continue to fly that. So how do you sort of maintain both? Because this is not one is good, the other is bad. It's both. Mm-hmm. And the other question that I have, since I have the mic, may I ask you, is that, I think that the company's leadership also changes with time because I see this as an entrepreneurial leadership to an executive leadership. I don't know if you've given some thought to that, where somebody who's an entrepreneur is great at the early part of the company, and then as the company becomes very large, and does it move towards more of somebody who is more of an executive that knows how to hit the numbers as opposed to how to create new stuff?
Okay. We have a good list to work on. Yes, the culture moves over time to be more operational, less risk-taking, less agile, and mistakes are expensive. Well, that's going to be self-fulfilling. As long as mistakes are viewed as expensive, then the culture is going to naturally become very risk-averse because people are going to save their butt. And thus, the rate of innovation is going to slow way down. So I think one way to attack that root cause by making the cost of mistakes much lower. And typical way to do that, and it varies by industry and may or may not work in what you do, is to move to an experimentation culture where the organization learns to run fast, cheap experiments with small blast radius. So then you can try more ideas because they're cheap. You can try them with less risk because the blast radius is really small, or you can actually de-risk before you run the experiment. So that moving from a culture of decision by hierarchy or opinion to a culture of decision by experiment. And there's a whole bunch of experimental methods. The Lean Startup was the book that made this famous, but there's much more on top of that. We actually had a story in our background. We had Eric Ries, the author of the Lean Startup, before the book came out, come and speak to us a couple of times. In the second of those, we had him do speed dating coaching. We had 4 teams queued up for 15-minute coaching sessions. Team would come up, present their quandary in 5 minutes. Eric would have 10 minutes to coach them. And I remember one of the teams said, hey, we're in the payroll division of Intuit. We do employee payroll. Through some evidence, we figured out that like half of the new customers who come to our website wanting to sign up want to do payroll that day. But you can't do that in payroll. In order to run a payroll, you've got to get all this history, to learn the employees, their prior deductions. You get all this stuff, and it takes 2 or 3 days to get up and running to run a payroll. So we think we should figure out a way to run payroll the same day, write checks the same day, and then correct them later after we do setup. But management just said no. In fact, we came from a startup. As Intuit created some payroll businesses, and we bought some others. And even our startup leadership said no. That's not how payroll works. We got to Intuit, and Intuit said no. That's not how payroll works. But Intuit said, well, run a survey to find out what customers think. So we ran a survey of existing payroll customers, asking, would you have done paychecks on day one, or did you want to set up first? Oh, and like 85% said, no, set up first, of course, this is payroll. But in our bones, we just feel we're missing an opportunity. So Eric said, well, this is easy. In a startup, you'd run the experiment tomorrow. You'd put up a dry test in your sign-up flow, giving people 2 options, the new customers. Do you want to pay checks today and set up later, or set up now and pay checks later? And in the first option, you have to explain that they may have to issue corrections because after setup, those paychecks may need to be revised. And then you'll find out what people want. And so he said, 24 hours, you should have this up. He said, okay, you're a big company. I'll give you 48 hours. Well, within 48 hours, the team did have that dry test page up in the sign-up flow. They directed a percentage of traffic there. Now, if they hadn't built any code, they'd only built one screen to give the choice. And that made it a real experiment. And by God, they got something like 45% of people hit paychecks same day. With that experimental proof, then everyone in leadership said, yes, of course, let's build this. We'll take the months to redo our engines because the engines were never built for this. But it's now worth it. We can see. And that change, when then later rolled out. And they didn't roll it out all at once. They rolled it out in small sections first. That produced the biggest gain in new customer conversion of anything they'd tried in years. So that's an example of running, in this case, a very cheap, very fast experiment. And there's a bunch of techniques to do this. That's only one. It doesn't always, depends on your scenario, but I think the biggest thing is if the mistakes are expensive, you will become risk averse. You've got to get mistakes to be cheap whenever possible. And it's not always possible, but it is in many cases. Go to the decision by experiment.
Scott, so how do you talk about failure with the CEOs you mentor?
Well, I talk about my background. After a few hours, there's, at least I sure felt a reluctance to talk about failure when I was a CEO, and I've learned, feature it. IBM had an old thing, mainframe days with Salesforce. If you had a weakness in your product line, feature it. So here, if you have failures as a leader, you should be highlighting those for the organization, starting with yourself. So a great example of this is our longtime CEO, Brad Smith. After a year in the job, did a round of speeches to the company, and he went to our engineering tech days where we have 1,000 people, engineers, engineering leaders, and he gave the dinner time talk, and his central slide was, here's my review of my first year in office. And he had in green all the stuff that he thought worked well. Then he had in red all the things he had screwed up on. And he had just as many in red as he had in green. And so he was willing to feature failure because the organization can tell. If you hide it, they know. But if you talk about it, you're going to learn from it. The only way to get better is to admit to failures and then learn root cause. And only by learning root cause can you then fix it. An example is we now have an operationally intensive part of the business. We hire tens of thousands of experts in accounting and tax and things like that, and they're now part of the service for people who pay the fee for what we call live, so TurboTax Live, for example. And manage that. Now you're managing high-cost labor. It's not just server time. There's real marginal cost, real quality issues, management of distributed workforce. These people are spread all around the country. And so we've, one of our leaders came to me and said, we want to go learn from Danaher, because Danaher is this operationally really superbly run company. So I said, I don't know anyone at Danaher, but I'll go find. And so I found who the brothers are who own the company, and they introduced us to a couple of their CEOs, and we went and did learning. But that's led us to adopt we're now on the journey to adopt the Toyota production system, the system by which Toyota rose to produce the highest quality cars made in the world and adjusted for labor, the lowest, other than the Chinese, the lowest cost cars in the world. And the way they do that, one key thing is they call anything that isn't exactly the way it should be a defect. And then they send the organization to discover the root causes of those defects and fix them. But by labeling any deviation from perfect a defect, giving the word, people are motivated to go, we're going to eliminate the causes of those defects. And it works. But it only works if you're rabid about immediately identifying defects. That's why they have that and-on cord on production lines, is so they can stop the line immediately when any worker detects a defect. They can stop the line and then get to root cause immediately.
It's more important to get to the root cause than to keep going fast.
If you keep going, the root cause is unchanged, and you just build more cars with that defect in it. And I was just touring Amazon's newest and most modern warehouse, which is in Tracy, California, about 2 hours south of here. And they've embraced the Toyota production system in their fulfillment operations. And you go into the bathroom, and there's a little red knob called the bathroom and-on. If there's any problem in the bathroom, you pull the knob. So there's an immediate flag to somebody that there's a problem. Because it's the only way you're going to solve it right away is to get right on it. So I know I embrace failure. I advertise it. And it's the way you get better.
Do you have these knobs in your personal life at all for defects? Or is there anything you can apply otherwise?
Oh, the knob would always be ringing. No, I have a wife, so I get that immediate attention. Immediate recognition of defects. She's very good at this.
That's true. No, I love when you talk about failure with CEOs. It's a key thing. I think my favorite way to start a board meeting is to have the highlights and the lowlights. Like what's not working. Let's acknowledge and talk about it.
This is really important because any board will know if you're just giving them the good stuff, the board will know you're telling them only half the story. And they know you're not being entirely honest. And you want to be known as being entirely straight with your board. So I think what you're talking about is a simple and brilliant technique.
Yeah, start with what's broken too.
Yep.
And so finally, what's the piece of advice, Scott, that you end up telling every CEO you mentor, and why do you think it's so crucial?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's a thing I screwed up on. That's why I think it's so important. I don't know, I talked about this before, so maybe... But the thing I didn't do was to get a good coach. When the company was growing hugely, 500 employees, and expanding rapidly, business tripling every year, there was a lot I needed to learn. Some things I was good at, some things I was crappy at. And I played around. I had one coach, wasn't very good. I interviewed another, but I didn't get on the warpath to find who's the best coach for me. And I found my skills kind of tapped out. And ultimately, after 11 years, I decided I needed to bring in somebody who was very strong, massively strong in the stuff where I was stumbling or weak. And it worked out great. Hired Bill Campbell, who's legendary. And we wouldn't be here without the addition of what he was so good at that I wasn't. But I still look back and said, I could have done better. And I know that because later, 2017, we employ a couple of exec coaches, consultants, contractors, to work with a number of our execs. So I'd seen them work. And I said, and they start with a 360. And I thought, I could probably use that. I'm the only person here who doesn't get a performance review. I might have some deferred maintenance. And so I had one of the coaches do the 360. And oh my God. I was aware dimly of some of the stuff, but didn't really want to admit it. And other stuff, I just had no idea how the bad impact I was having on teams, on leaders, inadvertent. My eyes were totally open. So I've had the coach ever since. And I've learned it's really made a difference in how I work. So, but don't wait. Let's see, that would have been 25 years. Don't wait 25 years to do that. Do that now. That's my one piece of advice.
Well, Scott, thank you so much.